This past summer, I went back to the beginning and did a redo of my Friday the 13th timeline, and it got me interested in revisiting a few others of my earliest videos to improve and update those with new information and improved everything. So on that note, I figured it's time to go back into dreams to redo the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise and include everything. Well, I mean, except Nightmare Freddy. We begin all the way back in 1984 with Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street, which introduces us to our heroine, Tina, who's having some bad dreams about a guy stalking her. She's friends with Gilbert Grape and Nancy here, and her boyfriend is tough guy Rod. That night, in a dream, she comes face to face with Freddy Krueger, red and green sweater wearing, fedora topped, knifed, gloved killer. When he slashes Tina, she's killed in the waking world, causing Nancy's dad to investigate. I don't know what to do here. Whenever John Saxon appears, I just call him Nancy's dad because usually I reference an actor by the role that I most know them as. But he's Nancy's dad to me. Always. Magda's here because when your husband owns the company, you can be sure that you're in the movie. Nancy's watching The Evil Dead, which came out in 1981, so we're at least past that, and Rod is killed. At his funeral, a quick shot of a license plate expires in December of 1984, so that's presumably when we're set. And Roger Rabbit appears as Nancy manages to pull something from out of her dream. It's revealed that Fred Krueger was a child murderer that got off on a technicality, so the parents teamed up and set him on fire. And he comes to kill Glenn, who, has a lot of blood in his body, apparently. Nancy brings Freddy out of her dream, heading to their big face-off in her house, and Nancy's mom is, I guess, killed? And pulled into a bed, I think. Finally, our heroine takes away Freddy's power by turning her back on him, and everything's okay, right? Well, no, as we hint that the Fred's not dead, as he pulls a mannequin through a window. And pause! The series continued 1 year later in 1985 with A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. And our dream maniac is back, and we have a new hero with Jesse. He's just moved into Nancy's old house, and he has a girl with Lisa here, and Springwood's high school has changed, and makes new friends with Grady, who likes pulling his pants down, and who tells him about Nancy, saying she went crazy because she was locked into the house and watched her boyfriend get butchered across the street. That night, he meets Freddy, who pulls the top off of his head to show his brain, which is weird because I guess Freddy doesn't have a skull, it's just skin and then brain, and that seems like a weak point to me. Jesse does the dance that rivals Crispin Glover's Friday one, and they find Nancy's diary and say that it's 5 years old. So that sets this one 5 years after the first. If that one's 84, then this would be 1989. The pages are from March, so it would be March of 84 in the first one, and then you can talk as much smack as you want on this movie, but how many horror franchises give you a family facing off against the menace of an exploding parakeet? So Freddy smacks a butt with a towel, and we're told that Nancy's mom killed herself in the living room. So either things happened differently than we saw in the last movie, or that's the story that they told people. Grady talks with his mouth full in one of the finest performances in all of film.
So you going to Lisa's house tomorrow night?
Nope. I'm grounded.
How come?
I think my grandmother down a flight of stairs.
And Fred starts to take over, and he ends up in an old factory. And what the hell are those? Whose faces even are those? Love wins out, and Jesse defeats Freddy, but the next day we see that he's not really gone. Of course. 2 years later, the nightmare returned with A Nightmare on Elm Street 3: Dream Warriors in 1987. Wes Craven returned to conceive the story, with Frank Darabont fleshing out and writing the script, with Chuck Russell directing for the first time. We meet the medium, and she's dreaming of a familiar-looking house. She's institutionalized with Cowboy Curtis and Good Doc Gordon and the mean old Doc Sims. And you know, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but she's a minor villain in this movie, and nothing comes out of that. She just screws everyone over and then goes on her merry way. Nancy returns, still sporting that white streak, and she's a medical intern. So we're a while after the first film, enough for her to finish high school and then some medical schooling. She has some medication that expires in 1989, but who knows how long its shelf life is. There's also the group of troubled teens like Philip, Kincaid, and Joey, and it seems like Kristen has special abilities to bring other people into her dreams, and she gets Nancy to help her fight this giant penis. What, that's clearly what this is. There's other kids with Jennifer and Taryn, and Nancy reiterates that her mother died in her sleep, a little different than people saying that she killed herself in the last film. Philip dies in vain, Jennifer gets primed up without being able to finish watching Critters, and Nancy tells her story, and she says that Freddy killed her friends 6 years ago, which makes this film a year after part 2. So again, if the first one was 84, I guess this is 1990? They each discover that in their dreams, they have great powers like wizardry and gymnastics, super strength, and mohawk and switchblade power. Like, you can dream of anything, guys, and this is what you came up with. We get Freddy's mother's backstory and the whole bastard son of 100 maniacs, which is said to have occurred in the 40s. They visit Nancy's dad, who's a security guard now, and they go into the dream to do final battle. Taryn gets juiced, Will rolls for some serious damage, and while trying to bury Freddy's remains, Dad gets killed. Nancy finally gets gloved while Fred gets buried, and then we see Amanda's gravestone, which gives her death date as 1968, and then we get another setup for more. It only took 1 year for that to happen with 1988's A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, now directed by Rennie Harlin, with Craven again having no involvement. Kristen is back, now recast, and Joey and Kincaid are back as well, and she has a new friend in Alice and a new boyfriend in Rick, plus other high school kids, Deb and Sheila. Kristen and the boys have reintegrated into a school setting, and Joey's hair has grown quite a bit, so it's definitely a little while after the last one, and Freddy is brought back to life when a dog pees fire on his grave. It's complicated. It's not really complicated, it's just stupid. Kincaid made it all the way through the last one, defying the whole black guy dies first thing, but here, well, the black guy dies first. Joey's next, falling for the same crap he did in the last movie, and the old house is in complete disarray. So it seems like in the time between the second film and this one, Mark's family moved and the house was abandoned. We're at minimum like a year and a half away from that one's ending, but that seems like it would take a long time to happen, and since Kristen is the last of the original Elm Street children, Freddy can only get to other people through her powers. So I'm not sure why he's so quick to kill her, but he does. And wait, she's awake when this postcard thing happens. How is Freddy affecting the real world here? We see Kristen's grave, but they intentionally cover the year, and is it weird that she just so happens to be buried by Kincaid and Nancy? I mean, what are the odds? Fred kills Sheila, and yeah, Lynn Shay was a teacher in the first one, so let's get Bob in here for this one. And when Alice goes by the theater, Hairspray is playing, and now that came out in 1988, which is the year the film was shot, so that's a bit curious. This may take place in 88 then, and the only thing that would contradict that is a single license plate sticker, so I guess we'll see. The theater is also playing Rennie Harlan's Prison, so it might just run old movies since that came out in 1987. He takes out Deb next by turning her into a big roach and smashing her. Like, how would that translate in the real world? And then, while preparing for final battle, I love this, Alice gathers all of the weapons of her dead friends, a plot device that they've been building for the entire film, but then it's revealed that Freddy and Alice are both dream masters, guarding the good and bad dream gates. Remember that. Oh wait, don't, because it's literally never brought up again. Then Alice uses Rick's karate and Deb's strength and Sheila's bug zapper thing to... Oh wait, he just shrugs all that off. The thing that they've spent a whole bunch of time developing, and none of it matters. Instead, she remembers a nursery rhyme and shows Freddy his reflection, which, yeah, that kills him. 1 year later, in 1989, the series continued with Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, directed by Stephen Hopkins, who would later become one of the driving forces between 24 and Californication. Alice is back, still with Dan from the last movie, and she's starting to have those bad dreams again. She sees the events of Freddy's conception and, I wonder which one was the actual father. The kids are graduating, and hey, there's an actual date. There's banners and tassels all saying 1989, giving a confirmed year for like the first time in the whole series. With that, it appears the Hairspray poster is correct and the license plate was wrong. That would place part 4 as 1 year earlier in 88, assuming it's 1 year between 3 and 4, Dream Warriors takes place in 87. So all 3 of those films are in real time. Part 2 takes place 1 year prior to 3, so that's in 86, with the first movie happening in 1981. The only issues there are with that is the license plate sticker, which is whatever, and Nancy watching The Evil Dead on TV, which probably wouldn't have been possible, but this is just a universe in which The Evil Dead came out a little earlier than ours, I suppose. Alice has a bunch of new friends and witnesses Freddy's rebirth, and he then murders Dan, turning him into a motorcycle. It turns out that Alice is pregnant, and she tries to tell everyone about Freddy, and no one would believe her, which, I don't know, a year ago, like 6 of your classmates died under mysterious circumstances, all around Alice, and now it's starting again, so maybe, I don't know, at least be a little worried? Greta gets stuffed, and Mark has a calendar on his drawing table for 1989, although for some reason it's in January, but they were graduating, so I guess he just hasn't flipped that page for a few months. Alice meets Dream Jacob, and it turns out that Freddy is using the dreams of her unborn child to access others, and her doctor calls Dan's parents to say that he's concerned about her, and that's what HIPAA is. A doctor cannot reveal private health information to others without Alice's consent. So if you're curious what that was really for, there it is. They say that Amanda Kruger killed herself when Freddy was set loose way back when, and she died in 1968, and Kruger was killed shortly after that, so that solidifies his original death in 1968. Mark goes up against Skater Freddy and Super Freddy. Remember Scary Freddy? Remember that guy? They head to a showdown in a distorted dream world, and they free Amanda's spirit, who uses her powers to fight Fred and trap him away again. Jacob is born, and it's hinted that it's not over, of course. There was a 2-year gap, but in 1991 they decided to end the franchise with Freddy's Dead, the final nightmare. And you know that there's a rule in horror franchises that if they call it a final chapter, they absolutely have to stick with it, right? We get this graphic in the beginning saying that this film takes place 10 years from now, which raises a lot of questions. Is it to mean 10 years from whenever you're watching this? Like, I'm in 2021 right now, so is it set in 2031? Is it 10 years from the last film? So is it 1999? Or is it 10 years from the year that it's released? So it's 2001. For the sake of ease, we're going to go with the 10 years from the last film. I'm cheating a bit, but I just did the Jason timeline, so I know that I'm gonna have to figure in Freddy vs. Jason, so 1999 makes the most sense at this point. We learn that all the kids are gone from Springwood, and, well, Wicked Witch Freddy tells us that they're not going for a more serious tone, especially when they use Night on Bald Mountain as the score. Oh, it's Bob Shay again, and our new group of kids include John Arbuckle and this girl who can talk without moving her mouth.
You ain't getting none, Carlos.
You sweating?
You ain't getting none.
You wetting?
You ain't getting none.
And a crew member from the Nostromo is here, and he's coincidentally talking about the dream demons who give one person the ability to enter dreams as their vessel. And we also meet Maggie, who has bad dreams herself. They head back with the last surviving Springwood child, only to discover a crazy town with no kids, but hey, they have Roseanne and Tom Arnold. And who would have thought that 30 years later, Tom is the kind of normal one? They get some timeline info here, and we learn that Freddy killed Elvis in 1977, and hey, that's canon. It's on the blackboard, so it has to be true. There's also a news article about a missing boy, but it looks like someone was sleeping when they actually wrote the body of the article. Like, look, I know that this was made before high-res DVD releases, but this was '91. There were VHS copies with pause buttons, and they put this thing like full frame in the shot. Did they think no one would notice this? There's a board with victims' names through the years, going back to 1978, but keep in mind that the dates are the year that they were to graduate, so it doesn't give info on when Freddy killed them or anything, because otherwise you'd think that he'd started killing back in '78. But we are told that he had a kid taken away from him in 1966. For some reason, John Doe still thinks it's him, but if this is 1999, which would be the earliest that this one would be, his kid is a minimum of 33 years old, which John ain't. The kids are killed via ear, and Johnny Depp appears, playing himself and not Glenn, and
All right. Super Spencer!
man, I thought they couldn't out-cheese Super Freddy, but they pulled it off. Somehow, without the aid of Kristen or Alice's powers, they're able to just be in each other's dreams. And yeah, they never bothered to explain how Freddy can now get into just anyone's dreams when in the past 2 movies he needed to use Alice or her kid to do so.
Hey, you forgot the power glove!
Oh, yeah, there's the power glove. I did almost forget. Thanks, Freddy. He then goes after John, but I guess even with unlimited dream powers, you sometimes need the help of a suspension wire, and Maggie discovers that she's a little Krueger. It's insinuated that her mother discovered his past times, so he killed her, and that was the final straw for the town to find out that he was the Springwood Killer. And Maggie has to try to bring Freddy out of the dream. So, she, well, puts on 3D glasses. You see, this was originally released in 3D for the finale, but when she puts the glasses on, you put yours on. But without that element, it's really, really stupid. Especially when Maggie looks at her hands, bemused that it's in 3D. But hey, Maggie, your hand is always in 3D. Zipping through his past, we see him as a child, and then with his foster father, it's that homeless guy from Prince of Darkness, and when he was burned by the angry mob, including the dream demons offering him the gig. They bring him out, but somehow he's still able to alter reality a bit, but when she breaks his hand, he has trouble moving it. Like, dude, you just shapeshifted and crawled on the ceiling. Why can't you fix your hand? Maggie stabs him with his own glove, then blows him up, and this was a special effect in a theatrically released film. They announce Freddy's dead, and that's it. The franchise was ended. Well, they sorta kept their promise and sorta didn't, because just 3 years later, Wes Craven's New Nightmare was released in 1994. It's actually set in the real world, and we see them making another Nightmare movie, directed by Wes Craven. And Nancy is here, but she's playing a woman named Heather Langenkamp now, because that Nancy lady is a really good actress. She has a husband and son who wants to play with you, Daddy, but she's having Freddy dreams, and there's earthquakes. And the news mentioned that there's a structure that was badly damaged in Northridge recently, and it's referencing the Northridge earthquake of 1994, so that appears to be when this one is set. But it's not like it's set earlier than Freddy's Dead, because it's in a separate universe, the real world. Here, the Freddy movies are just that. Movies. She's on TV and they say that it's approaching the 10th anniversary of the original, so we're definitely in mid-94, after the Northridge quake in January, but earlier than November when the first was released. Robert shows up playing himself, and Heather's husband dies in a Freddy attack, but he makes sure to tickle his balls first. When we get a peek at him, his face makeup is quite different, as is his claw, and John Saxon shows up as himself, but oddly, even though Bob Shaye played himself, Lynn Shaye appears as a nurse. Wes reveals that there's an ancient entity that's taken the form of Freddy, and the movies kept him quiet, but now that they're not making them, he's loose in the real world. So this villain isn't actually what we think of as Freddy, but another creature that likes that shape. Let's call him Roy Freddy. They redo a bunch of bits from the original, like the screw your pass and the dragging on the ceiling, and fantasy and reality start to blend together, and Heather Nancy has to enter the dream world to find little Dylan. They face off, and how can Freddy not fit through here? He can disappear and reappear. He can change his shape, he's stretching his arm. Plus, it plainly looks like he should be able to fit. They burn Freddy, revealing his true form, I think, and weirdly, when they have the full script, the revisions are dated November of '93, so that actually changes things. You see, the insinuation given earlier is that the events happen along with Wes writing them. He doesn't know what's going to happen because he's still dreaming it. We know that the movie events match when he's writing because we're told that earlier with the scenes where Robert tells them that he was only up to the Dylan reaching God scene, and when Wes tells Nancy that in their meeting. So the scene that's revised is from about an hour into the movie. Dylan is already in the hospital. The rest of the movie literally only takes place over a day or two. For him to have written the scene and then went back to revise it means that those events actually happened around the same time. So this actually takes place in 1993. This just means that the earthquakes in Northridge happened at a slightly earlier time in this universe, and the TV guy was referring to the 10th anniversary is coming up next year. It's coming up. The Dreamy One took a nap for 9 long years, and it wasn't until 2004's Freddy vs. Jason that he returned to the big screen. It starts with a recap of Freddy's story, and we again see him being burned, although no mention is made of the Dream Demons, and he goes through his adventures, and when he does, they show clips of Freddy's Dead, which lets us know that this one is set sometime after that one. They don't explain how exactly Fred survived Part 6, but it is mentioned that they were able to make everyone forget him, which took away his power, and he's been trapped ever since no one is afraid of him. He's in hell, but it's not clear if he's trapped there or just visiting, and he seeks out Jason to help him out. With Jason in hell, that places this after Jason goes to hell, which I talked about in my Friday the 13th video, and then we're back at the Elm Street house, which I guess since we last saw it in Part 4 has been completely restored to its original state and has new owners. Considering that that was back in the 80s and presumably about 15 years or so ago, it's not that big of a stretch. We're in Springwood and there are tons of kids around, so we're clearly a bit after Freddy's dead, and the town has refilled with younger people, wiping all references to Freddy and keeping him out of people's minds. It seems like this would take a while, and then while in the institution, Mark says that he hasn't seen his family in 4 years and he's been locked up. It's insinuated that he's been there since his brother died, and later it's revealed that his brother was killed by Freddy. So I think that they're saying that Freddy was active 4 years prior. Krueger tries to build his power, but Jason gets in his way, and the police chief says that there's been 4 years of peace, again implying that they've had Freddy taken care of for 4 years. So it seems like the intention is to have this be 4 years after part 6. So either 2004, 2006, or 4 years from 10 years from whenever you watched part 6 or something. They bring back Hypnocil from the 3rd movie, and Freddy puts Jason to sleep, forcing him into the dream world, where they begin to do battle. In the real world, the kids make it to Crystal Lake, and then there's this subplot in which Laurie's boyfriend was put away for saying her dad killed her mom. But it turns out that Freddy did it, which is interesting because they show Will at the age that this happens, but he doesn't really look 14 or so, but I guess this was supposed to be 4 years ago, before the events of Freddy's dead. Or else he wasn't really killed in that one and was still kind of active afterwards, although the sheriff said they had 4 years of peace, so I guess that this was supposed to be more than 4 years ago. After bringing Freddy into reality, they have their big fight, revealing a sign that says that new properties on the lake are opening in spring of 2004. Okay, now, school's in and the weather's nice, but no one is talking about graduation, so I think the best placement for this one is actually later in 03, like late September, or early October, or something like that. One thing is for sure is that part 6 is locked down as 99 then, since they're talking about 4 years of peace. So that one taking place in 2001 or later makes no sense in that case. If it's in 99 and this is 03, the 4 years lines are logical, and that whole 10 years from now thing basically translates into 10 years from part 5. Finally, Jason shoves Freddy's arm through his chest and Laurie chops his head off, and we see Jason walk up, triumphant, and even though we see Fred wink at the camera, this is the last time that we see this incarnation of the character in a film form. Okay, that's it. That's all that there. What's that? I have to do the remake. I have to do it this time because I didn't really cover it the first time. Really? I mean, I don't want. Okay, well, okay, because there's no one there. There's nothing in my ear. I'm sitting here alone. I am the only employee. 6 years later, remakes were happening left and right, and 1 year after Jason got one, 2010 gave us Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake. We meet new Nancy, new Dean, and new Chris, and Quentin. So they give some of them the same names, but not others. They wanted to make sure there was a Dean, but I guess the name Glenn just wasn't cool. But then they throw a Jesse in there to give the second film some love, but no Tina. Freddy's been recast and is Rorschach now, and look out! It's the Kurgan! And hey, remember the cool effect in the first one in which Freddy came out of the wall? Well, it looks like this now, so enjoy.
Where are all the photos of me from when I was younger?
Silly Chris, all the photos of you are of when you were younger. Sorry, Mitch. So Chris finds these boxes, and she went to first grade in 1996, which she'd either be 6 or 7'4". So she was born in 89 or 90. Assuming that she's around 18 or so now, this is either 2007 or 2008, give or take. But then Dean's obituary actually tells us that he was born in 1991 and was 19 when he died. So that actually makes this 2010, the year of release. There's this legal envelope giving some court dates of 91 and 95, and Nancy and Quentin went to preschool together in 94 and 95, and all the kids are around the same age, so they're all around 18 or 19 or so and should should maybe be in college. Fred worked at the school and he does bad things to the kids, and while researching the rest of her class, Nancy sees this girl who was 17 when she died. And it was a day or two earlier according to the searches. So 17-year-old Lisa here and 19-year-old Dean were in the same preschool class. We see a flashback to them killing Freddy, and Quentin says that they were 5, which was a little weird because the other kids they looked up were all 17. Dean was only 19 years old, so if he was 5 in 95, this should only be 12 years later, so 2007? Was Dean's age an error? It seems like it, because 19 seems a little old for a high school kid. So I guess it's 2007, but then Nancy's date of birth is on this medical paperwork, and she was born in 1992, but Quentin says that they were 5, but it was 94/95 in that picture, so Nancy was in preschool at 3 years old? And if it's 2007, then she's only 15? Or is it 2010 and she's 18? But then she's 3 in preschool. Did they do this on purpose? Are they just messing with me? According to IMDb, they used different dates in the film and never said exactly how old Nancy and Quentin are intentionally to prevent the film from being too dated. You showed several dates. All you did was ensure that your film could either be one of 4 different years. It's either 2007, 8, 9, or 10. Good job. I guess that we should talk about Freddy's Nightmares though, because in 1988, around the release of the 4th movie, there was a 2-season TV show that ran in syndication. There were 44 episodes in total, and each one featured an introduction by the man himself, although the show was more of an anthology than a continuation of his story. The episodes all pretty much took place in Springwood, and the first episode gave some backstory and showed Krueger's trial. And it's unusual because Freddy's trial and murders were in the late 60s, but here, everything looks to be set in the mid-80s. So here's the thing, this appears to be a nice sort of filler-inner of details of his life before his death, but it's not canon. Why? Well, at the time, setting is off, as well as the fact that we see all the parents involved, and none of them are people we know from the films. Plus, there appear to be several characters that are impactful to Freddy's death that he just never mentions again. In the beginning of the episode, though, Freddy makes a point to say that he's not in our nightmares, and this is actually his, which I think is implying that it's his own version of events that occurred and not canon. Also, if you're a fan of the original continuity in Freddy vs. Jason, you know that there was intended to be a sequel to it involving Ash. This makes that Evil Dead appearance in the first film a little confusing, but it continued the story from FVJ, and there was a sequel to it that brought back Maggie and Dr. Gordon and Alice and Jacob, and even Nancy's ghost at one point. There's also been a number of other comic books, all non-canon, from several different companies, including Marvel Comics. That one featured a nice continuation of the 3rd film in which Nancy returns in dreams because Kristen used her powers to dream her into a beautiful dream and continue fighting Freddy. There's also a series of novels, mostly adaptations of the movies, although the 3rd one is pretty different from the film, even including a scene where Neil and Nancy sleep together. And of course, there's video games, although they're pretty dated. One did appear for the NES though, back in the late 80s, which probably goes to show just how mainstream that Freddy Mania was back then. He's also shown up as a playable character in games like Mortal Kombat and Dead by Daylight. Plus, he's had numerous cameos, including most recently in the movie Ready Player One and on the sitcom The Goldbergs, in which Robert Englund himself returned. So there you have it, all the movies and all the extra stuff that I didn't include the first time around, here repackaged and resorted and reconfigured for you. I hope you enjoyed that. The Nightmare on Elm Street movies are always a fun rewatch. There's definitely a couple of rough spots in there, but for the most part, they're a lot of fun to watch. Robert Englund kills it, Heather Langenkamp kills it. Man, there's so many great things about this franchise that are to be loved. Let me know down in the comments what you loved about these movies. Let me know if you enjoy this timeline and prefer it to the original. Let me know if you want to defend the remake. I'm okay with that. That's totally fine. I myself do not care for it, but if you do, I get it. Yep, also make sure to please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please hit that subscribe button if you enjoy the channel and want to see more. Hit the bell if you want notifications of when new videos come out. And also please check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines. And you can help support the channel like these guys do because they are very, very cool for doing it. It makes you cool to help out. But you can also just help out by continuing to watch the videos and helping support the channel that way. And I'll see you very shortly for another great one. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.